Hey guys, and welcome to Quality Shot. I'm really excited to be joined by not just the Spencer chairman, but also my uncle Khawar Saleem, and of course the former Spencer first team captain as well, who is one of the only living people that I know to have a bench named after himself at a cricket club. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Fizan. Looking forward to the chat. I love cricket, so always a good time spent talking about cricket.
Let's get into the juicier part of what we want to discuss then, the golden years, I guess, of probably your playing days, and at Spencer coming back probably after university, and a few of the seasons, which I'm sure you'll go into more detail about, but playing at an extremely high level as well. Some of the big players, as you said, who played Test cricket, played for Surrey, etc. Some really big names in those teams as well in the coming years. Before we get into your captaining, actually, I'm assuming you had a few years playing in that team before you became captain.
Correct.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we had a really great side. So we had a captain called Percy Plunkett, who was an ex-Surrey guy who had led the club for a number of years and continued to lead. And I played under Percy, really great guy. Some great players played in those teams. So, he was an old figure, able to, manage a lot of personalities, a lot of strong personalities. So I played in that side extensively. When I came back from university, we had some really good success. Played at the Oval a couple of times in finals, and we had some players who were top draw. And then, he slowly shifted out, and one of the other players came in and started to captain, but that didn't really work out. And so our what I would call our professional was Monty Lynch. So Monty Lynch, who was Surrey in England, became captain, and Monty, he coaches now. I think London schools and others, and anyone who's been coached by him will know he's a pretty full-on character. He's one of those guys who's old school. We used to dread standing up for catching practice before the game because he'd absolutely leather the ball at us. And we'd be like, my God, we're going to break our fingers. There's no gloves in those days, when you're standing there. And, but he would just turn around and say, they're not going to pat it to you when they're batting. They're going to smash it at you. You need to set your catches. And he could put his money where his mouth is, because if, you'll see a lot of highlights of Waqar Younis bowling at Surrey and nicks off. If they didn't go to keeper, then the person who caught them at slip was Monty Lynch. He had buckets. So he could put his money where his mouth is. So, he said there's no excuse. So Monty did it, but obviously as a professional, he wasn't going to do it for an extended period of time. And so, that was a bit of an end of an era where Monty and Percy and these guys who'd been, around. There was a bit of a change in the guard, and at that point I stepped into the captaincy. But what a team! The players I played with. The '99 World Cup, we had Ricardo Powell come to the West Indies team. He was an emerging talent. He came and played for us. In the opposition, you had people like Neil Johnson, who was player of the tournament. He was playing for Addiscombe. I played against Jimmy Adams, was playing at Sunbury. Played against him. Great players. In our side, we had Graham Brown, who's Surrey's wicketkeeper for a number of years. Mark Kenlock, who was, Surrey left armour. The Tudor brothers had emerged during that period as well. So Alex, we lost Alex obviously to England duty, but played with Alex Tudor at that time. His emergence. David Thompson, England under 19s Lancashire Surrey quick bowler, who was actually quicker than Tudor. Unbelievable. I used to 24 yards back at slip. I still remember to this day. I go and stand at Spencer sometimes and actually remember where I was standing because I marked it against the gate, and it's unbelievable how far back I was for him. But some great players who played. But we had a bit of a shift from that side. As I said, the side had been brilliant in 94, 95, done quite a lot. But then it started moving. We lost players to county cricket. We lost some of the older guard. And hence, the transition into a new phase, which was, me essentially a colt coming through and taking on the reins and rebuilding the side a little bit.
That sounds really interesting, actually. So you talked about these incredible players coming through, and you mentioned about Thompson. And I think I remember you and I were talking about him a lot, about how rapid he was and how quick he was. What was it weird to have someone in the side playing who was bowling, who was so aggressive and so quick, and then obviously you had someone who really well, Alex Tudor, who was playing for England, and you're thinking actually this guy could probably do similar things, but he was playing for you guys and doing such a good job. Was it a bit strange to have that comparison there?
No, because I think Tomo had and it's funny, even now I see old people, some of the umpires who used to umpire then, everybody talks about Tomo, people would remember him incredibly because, he'd bowl you a 90-mile-an-hour bounce and the next ball would be a beamer, which would, nearly kill you, right? So he had a little bit of that, but he was so I think he had some issues with Surrey, Lancashire. As I said, he played I think England under 19s, and his career I don't think he played with Wasim Akram at Lancashire. He loved Wasim Akram, said he taught him a lot of stuff, as he absolutely adored him. But I think he was a bit of one of those personalities that now people adjust to a lot more. I think at that time you had to fit within a certain criteria, and I don't think he fit within that criteria. But he was unbelievable. I mean, I'll give you an example. We played at Addiscombe. It's not massively long boundaries, but, and their opener still remembers this because Amer actually told me a story. He met him in Australia and he still remembered this story. Richard Johnson, he'd played a bit for Surrey as well. So Tomo's running and was bowling like the wind. And, I was at first or second slip and Jono's gone for a cut and he's got a bit of a top edge and it's flown through to me and it's hit me on the top of the head, on top of the hat. And it's nearly gone for 6 off the top of my head. It's literally gone all the way to the boundary off the top of my head. He was bowling that quick. And, I managed, burst through and clipped my fingers as well. I mean, to be fair, I got my fingers to it, but it was traveling. And, he was that quick. And, the difference was that Alex was there. He was at the batters all the time. He was... and he bowled, he seamed it around, he was young, he was, and he was quick as well. But I think, that potential, Tomo was slightly more towards having been through the system and come out the other end, whereas Tudes was starting. And, within a couple of years of that, Tudes was taking the War Brothers wickets in the Ashes. Away. So you can see, the difference. But, as I said, I love Tomo to death. I love Tudes to death as well. But Tomo, he would sweat buckets. The umpires would laugh. He'd have a towel with him. He'd be soaking with sweat, and he'd bowl for me all day. He would never a problem for me. He would occasionally turn up late. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. And be a little bit, but he would on the field absolutely brilliant. So I'd have him at one end, and then my brother Amer at the other end. Absolutely, you'd have Tomo bowling absolute lightning all over the place, and you have Ames bowling in swingers, away duckers, testing the batsman all sorts, and his nasty little bouncer that he has as well. So we had a great opening partnership. And then if Tudes was playing, then obviously Tudes, but a lot of the time Tudes wasn't allowed to bowl. He wasn't allowed to bowl for us. He could only bat because he'd be on restricted overs. But before he got into the Surrey team, Tudes. I mean, I played against Tudes in an end of season game when he must have been about 13 or 12, and I didn't know who he was. And he ran up and this kid bowled at me, and it was down the leg side a bit, and I went to flick it, and where the ball kind of kisses your backside as it goes through and leaves like a burn mark across your butt. And I was like, who's this kid? He's just like, where he just clips you and the keeper takes down. I was like, this kid's quite nippy, and he was only a youngster then, but he was tall and gangly. I was like, wow, this kid's got a little bit of something about him. And he just went from strength to strength. But definitely, I think it just shows the mental aspect. And I think you can't deny that there's also a establishment. Do you fit in within what the establishments want? And I think, cricket is a big example of that, where it's very, very subjective sometimes. Runs scored, wickets taken, stats can lie a little bit. It can then come down to, does your face fit a little bit? And I think there's a definite, there's definitely two things there, where Tomo probably didn't quite fit it, and therefore, ended up playing a lot of club cricket when he could have been. I think if somebody had got him and really looked after him and maybe spent a lot of time with him, he could have made it to Test cricket.
So it sounds like as well, sometimes it's just the rub of the green, isn't it? And where you're being in the right place at the right time.
Correct.
You've touched on Alex Tudor quite a bit, so you've definitely covered all of my questions. And I just wanted to, obviously after playing for Spencer as well, and you guys are still in contact, and he's gone on to play for England and also for Surrey, and he had a very successful career, I think, in general anyway. Of probably didn't play as long as he would have liked, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that because of injuries, etc. But as someone who played for Spencer and you're seeing him playing for England, etc., what was was there a kind of element of pride, kind of seeing him play for England, knowing that I captained him, he comes back as well, and there must have been quite a lot of fanfare around Spencer and pride amongst the guys at Spencer, saying, you know what, he's come from the Colts and we've looked after him and he's one of our own, and look what he's gone on to do.
Absolutely. I mean, he's our marquee player, right? I mean, fabulous. What a player. Bold like the wind, smashed it with the bat. Larger than life. I captained him, wasn't a problem whatsoever. Encouraging. Really nice guy. Really loved by the younger players as well. Supportive, and that helps, right? A lot of people, will have a lot of good things to say about him because he's that type of character. And captaining him, he was brilliant. Never ever, he could have kicked his toys out. Every captain will make mistakes, but he never, he'd wait to say maybe afterwards in the change room when we'd come and have a chat, because he could see things obviously, but never a problem for me whatsoever. Played when he could. He scored runs. Some players, international players, will play club cricket and do nothing, and I won't name names, but there were people at clubs, not necessarily Spencer, but the people at clubs paid a lot of money, couldn't be bothered, wouldn't bowl, wouldn't bat, just were there for a payday. He was complete opposite. He'd turn up, he'd play. The year that I captained him, we nearly won the Premiership. He played 10 games, averaged 40 plus, was a brilliant influence on the team. Bold when he needed to, fantastic. And for the club, huge, right? I mean, I remember Bob Willis on commentary, test match cricket, test matches where Alex was bowling, would say, Alex Tudor's bowling, against, wherever it's Australia, India, whoever it may be, he's, from South London, from Spencer Club. Bob had a lot of affection for us as well. And, would mention us. And it's a big thing for us, right? It's a big player. Went on to do great things for England, and he's obviously had some injuries, but, he was playing for Essex when he came back and played for us as well. And, I'm still in touch with him today. And, he's at Kim Bolton School and doing a fantastic job there. I'm sure the kids love him. And, I know my kids loved him, indoor nets, or anything, the way he encouraged people, they absolutely loved him. I remember him bowling at my oldest Yusuf in the garden when he was a little lad, and I have it on video, and he'd just bowl at him, and I said to you, you faced a test bowler. It may have been a tennis ball in the back garden, but you faced him, and and he would do that. He was that type of guy. So fabulous guy, bold like the wind as well, and could be a very nice guy, lovely guy, but could do a lot of damage to you if you felt like it. We played a game, I think, against Isha where he essentially was at first slip and wasn't allowed to bowl, and it was going into a ball draw. They had, there were 6 wickets down, about 10 overs left, and they were blocking the hell out of it. And he was at slip, and he was getting a little bit, annoyed that they were blocking it. And he, must have said, "Come on, guys, these guys, they're not going for it; they're just blocking it." And the batsman turned around and said to him, "Who are you?" And he turned around to me and said, "Harvey, I'd like the next over at the other end, please." He bowled 4 overs and he took all 4 wickets for about 2 runs, and absolutely cleaned them up. And I went into afterwards in the clubhouse, and I said to their captain, "Hey, can you tell me who that guy is? I want to go and thank him, because Tudes wasn't supposed to bowl, but by him giving him a little chirp, he decided that he would have a few overs." And that's the thing. That's where you see the difference between those guys and club cricketers. With all respect. There's such a difference. It's unbelievable. As you get to the top tiers, those players have, mental strength, they have physical ability, they have everything. And when they really want to, club cricket, obviously they're probably getting some practice, but if they want to turn it on, you realise, when they're playing test cricket, when they're bowling full out and they're fully warmed up, it's a different game. So while we say, "Oh, I faced Jimmy Adams bowling left arm spin at me," things like that, and you think, "Oh, wow," when he's batting, it's not really when they're in their test match mode or in their one-day international, or they're playing for their country. It's a different ball game. So it's great to say, "Oh yeah, I got 50 against, Jade Dernbach," or, I hit Jimmy Adams all over the place. until you're doing it a test match or one day international where they really, really are up for it, then you can say it. Otherwise, I saw somebody, we played Farnham and one of their guys got 100 against Tudes. It was brilliant 100, absolutely. But I know for a fact that, Alex was reining it in because he had a county match in a couple of days, and so, it's a brilliant 100. And, I'm sure that guy, and, I know that guy, he's obviously still dining on it today, I'm sure. But, the fact is, it's a different game. It's a different game when they are really want to, and you occasionally get glimpses of it.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned that you had, Tom or Alex Tudor from one end, and you'd have Armand was all from the other end.
Yes.
What was it like being able to play Premiership cricket with your younger brother, and how was it being able to have? I'm sure it would have been a lot of fun, and I'm sure there also would have been a familiarity as well. So after there would have been little discussions as well and debates, I'm sure, as there always is between brothers, as I know as well. But how was it? It must have been amazing just being able to play with him, and now as well, you're still able to talk about the experiences and talk about these players you've played against, and you have that, I guess, kind of deep bond, which I'm sure you have anyways, but within cricket as well, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's a fantastic player. I mean, what's interesting, he's a very different type of player to me. So he was a quick bowler, and he'd go in and, he could crash it all over the place, where, I was, a top order batsman who was a bit more, bat the innings and try and, win the game from there. And he was what I would classify as the best finisher out there. He would bat at 6 or 7 for me, and he'd win the game. We'd need 50 to win or something off 10 overs, and he'd just go in there and clean up. So that was always a topic of discussion, because was I batting him too low? Batting him at 7, but he opened the bowling before me. So Monty Lynch. So how good Amer was, obviously he played county stuff as well beforehand, but essentially he was good enough that Monty Lynch, when he was captain, used to open the bowling with him and used to say, wow, because he'd bowl beautiful in swingers. And that's the thing, you don't necessarily always need express pace. He was quick and he could have a nasty bouncer as well, but he used to bowl big in swingers and he'd seam the odd ball away. So it was fantastic to obviously play with him, because, he was a bowler, I was a batter. It was great. I think, we still always have fun about, how many opportunities he's got batting up the order. Occasionally I'd send him in a limited over game and bat 3 or 4, etc. But, he was bowler first and foremost, and an aggressive cricketer as that, and a really good cricketer. So I really enjoyed, and to be honest, the contrast was helpful, because obviously, he would attack more likely than I would in certain situations, etc. He would be looking for the wicket. I may be looking at the scoreboard and going, okay, we can't let them get away here, for example, things like that. So there was a slight, there was a good kind of difference that we could, use to benefit. And as I said, it was great. We still, we laugh about that Tomo story I told you about, where he hit me on the head, because he was probably at the slip next to me and laughing his head off. But a lot of cricket, we played a lot of cricket together. It's been fabulous. What can be better than having a brother who shares the same passion as you, and playing in an elite side, and both doing your thing. Both achieving, and it was great. It was great to play with him. As I said, underrated. In his batting, definitely, and he still can bowl. I mean, he runs up off 3 or 4 paces now, and he can hit people for fun if he wants to, so he still has that quick whippy wussy mucker arm action, which doesn't go away. So it was great. It was great, as I said, and as brothers, it's always great to have something that you do together. And we had a competitive, but it's interesting because obviously we were doing different things, so the competition wasn't there. Like, we were batting together, like the War Brothers, for example, where they're batting. So it was fantastic. And he, I think, went and played some games, with other sides, and did really well as well. As obviously work and family commitments, etc. So he's still playing at a really good level and still loves the game.
Yeah, it's that must have been. Yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it, to have that? And I think it's something that a lot of brothers, especially if they both play cricket, that's something they really want to do growing up, especially if they love the game. So hopefully we'll see what happens with everyone else as well. And we've got a lot of cricketers in the family, so we'll see. With those years and when you were captaining, I think you got promoted, didn't you? Was it back-to-back
Correct.
promotions? And then
no, we were in Division 1 when I took over. So this was the whole thing. When I took over, we'd gone down a division, so there was that clear out. So essentially, I had to do a rebuilding job. So I brought in a couple of youngsters, Neil Baker, who until recently was the first team captain, is now at Banstead. So I brought him in as a fresh-faced 15-year-old keeper. Patrick Turk, who was a leggy, who actually went. Terry Jenner, who's Shane Warne's mentor. England were trying to copy Shane Warne, and they picked like the best 2 or 3 leg spinners in the UK, and they sent him out to Australia to stay with Terry Jenner, and he went as well. So they were both the same age, around 15. Incredible, talents. So I basically picked them in the first team and said, right, you're in the first team. Don't worry, you're going to have at least 5 games. I'm not going to drop you. Just settle into the side. It's a top side. So that was a part of the rebuilding process. And then some people had stayed around. And for 2 years, we were in Division 1 where we, were close. We, a couple of them, we in fact 3 years, where last day we needed to win and didn't win on the last day to get promoted. So we came very close. But actually, that was a blessing in disguise, because it allowed us to build up that momentum of winning games. And we started to strengthen the team over 3 years. If we'd gone up very early, we'd have had to have gone and strengthened quite quickly and changed everything. So we had a good base. And we got promoted to the Premier Division, and actually were leading with 3 or 4 weeks to go. We basically blazed a trail in the Premier Division, and it was a very, as I said, Jimmy Adams at Sunbury, Reigate Priory, the Murtaugh brothers, great players all around. David Ward at Banstead, some really, really top players around, playing Ali Brown at, there was various players around. So yeah, we then. Literally were there or thereabouts. We ran out of a bit of steam towards the end of the season, and we were a bit more of what I would call a mercurial side, and things needed, we were quite aggressive in the way that we played. And so, you could be 3 down quite quickly because of the way that we played, and we continued to play that way. So we stayed true to that, but at the end, it wasn't quite enough. And, we ended up behind Reigate Priory and Wimbledon just by a bit, but we could have won that year. But fantastic, fantastic. I have that picture of that team, full of, county players or people, who had played at a really high level, but also youngsters from the side. And, good players like, Amer, my brother, guy, we had Pierre Phillips from South Africa. We had the Imran, we had the Mohammed brothers, the sons of Sadiq Mohammed were playing for us. Imran Mohammed, who played for Cambridge and Gloucestershire. So Amer Mohammed was a good player as well. So they're part of the Hanif Mohammed and Sadiq Mohammed, they're sons of Sadiq. So they were in that side as well. So some really, really good cricketers, but a good balance with club cricketers. And, we did fantastically well. And so, yeah, so we got promoted. We were in the Premiership for a couple of years. And then, to be honest, at that point, I was burnt out. I think, work was overtaking life. I had a young family. So, I was like, okay, this is, and that time, captain, you had to do everything. There was not a lot of help around making sure, so you had to go and find the players, do all the admin, select the team yourself, make sure that, everything was prepared for the game. We didn't have a groundsman on a Saturday. So making sure, the chairman was out there marking the wicket, it was lunches, you had to organise all the lunches, teams. It was a lot of work, and to play at that level, it was too much. And so I actually, at that point in 2005, I said, okay, we've done so well. The team is in a really good position. It's a good point for me to stop captaining. So I carried on playing for a couple of years, but I stopped captaining at that point because of the effort and the time. And, work was, over. And as I said, I had, Yusuf and Hamza were very young at that time, 3-4 years old. So, it was important that I balanced out my life a bit.
All for your insight as well. I really appreciate it. It was definitely insightful. There's definitely some things in there that I haven't heard before as well. So it's fantastic to get a bit of insight, and I'm sure a lot of other viewers will definitely have enjoyed it, because I know I have, even for things I've heard before. So it's fantastic to get that outlook. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.